What's up everyone, Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I am back with a collection update. So, I figured since I picked up some stuff at the shows that I went to, namely the Veil of Panath and Gorod one, and I also had stuff from the Metalhead box as well as some other stuff here, I figured, why not do another collection update? Sorry for the waiting videos too, I've been sick. Fucking bitch of a cold came through and gave me a sinus headache that was absolutely crippling, but I'm doing better, so back to doing this shit. So let's get on with it. Alright, first off, we got a couple of EPs from Gorod that I picked up at the show. We have Transcendence and Kiss the Freak. Transcendence came out in 2011. These are both self-released, by the way. And this is really more of a continuation of what they were doing on Process of a New Decline. Very straightforward tech death, but there's a lot of proggy leanings on here. And the last track is over 15 minutes long and really just is all over the place, and actually featured some of the first real clean vocals I'd heard from this band. Also features a really cool cover of Cynic's Textures. Really solid stuff in here. Thoroughly enjoyed this. This one is really interesting because it is more of a technical thrash album. These songs are a little bit more loose, a little bit more fun. It isn't as technical, but it's still very technical, if you get what I mean there. You don't really get a lot of like polyrhythmic stuff. The guitar work is exceptional, of course, because these guys are just monstrous. But it's notably more thrash metal centered. Really solid stuff. I absolutely loved both of these. This one came out in 2017, so this is closer to what they sound like now. But again, this is a little bit far removed. I think this was kind of like a concept or a challenge for them to actually do like something that isn't tech death. More close to thrash metal, actually. I mean, hell, even the cover's kind of thrashy. But yeah, both of these are absolutely sick, and I'm super glad I bought these from the band because these things apparently go for a fair amount of money online. But it was just cool to help out the band, too, and buy their shit. Definitely check both of these out. They are both really fun listens. Obscure Infinity, Putrefying Illusions. This is pretty much the only one I was missing from Obscure Infinity in terms of their full lengths, and it's another killer one. This is definitely more old school death metal. This is their second album, I believe. I think that's right. And this is actually not an FDA reissue. This actually came out on Obscure Dominion Records, which I don't know anything about, but I know they put this out, and it's pretty awesome. Just straightforward, old school death metal. Some blackened atmospheric parts in here. They kind of remind me a bit of Obliteration, but most of their sound is just fiercely old school death metal, and I absolutely love stuff like that. So if you're looking for some cool old school death metal, definitely check out these guys. And check out their other releases too, the other ones I brought up in other collection updates, because they really don't have a bad album as far as I've listened to. Good stuff. Definitely check it out. Nethergtate, Dimensional Purgatory. I actually bought this from the band. They were one of the local acts that opened up for the Veil of Panath show. And these guys actually opened up for Revocation and Voivod last year when we went to go see them. We got there late and missed them. But this is just solid death metal. Like, this is very, like, Morbid Angel-y, kind of Hate Eternal in spots. It really reminds me a lot of the Steve Tucker era of Morbid Angel. Like, there's some really nasty, sludgy, angular riffing on here. Really cool lead work. I have to say, when I saw him live, I think the vocals sounded deeper live, because there's a little bit more of a mid-register growl/scream on this, but it does get real low and nasty. Definitely check out the track Solace in Shade. I particularly love that one. It has a great hook to it. Big, chuggy, nasty riffs. Absolutely love this. This is really solid stuff. I look forward to seeing these guys again, because they're from Detroit, so there's a good chance I will. Check them out. Vaultwraith, Light the Candle in Honor of Devils. I just kind of picked this one up on a whim. It came out on Hell's Headbangers, and I like a lot of the stuff that comes out on Hell's Headbangers. This is blackened thrash / blackened heavy metal. Kind of leans a little bit closer to thrash, at least from the start. The heavy metal elements don't really start coming in until later. The production on this is okay. I don't like how the snare sounds on it, but there are lots of really catchy riffs on here. It's vocally very busy because they have two vocalists, a male and a female. And I gotta say, the main scream that's on here, I honestly can't tell if it's the male or female vocals. I think it's the female. Sound a lot like Peter Tagdren's like token scream from Hypocrisy. I've heard black and heavy metal and black and thrash work better in other albums, but this is still pretty solid. I think it runs a little long too, but definitely check it out. I mean, it wasn't necessarily entirely my thing, but I did enjoy parts of it, and who knows, you might dig it. Check it out. Blood Feast, the future state of Wicked. I figured I might as well pick up as much as I can from these guys since I'm seeing them at Maryland Death Fest. I definitely plan on checking these guys out because I've really enjoyed what I've heard. This is very fast, aggressive thrash metal. Reminds me a lot of like Slayer, Nuclear Assaults, Creator. I mean, it is just constantly flying and in your face. Vocals are a little more kind of shrieky. They kind of remind me of a lot of German thrash metal, just in terms of the vocal style that seems to pervade that. But it is high energy at all times. Guitars are constantly flying. This is just machine gun guitars left and right. And I love the overall energy on this. I definitely have some more coming in the mail, and I can't wait to jam that as well, because this was a fun listen across the board. It isn't like game changer thrash or anything like that, but it's well executed, it's fun, it's high energy, and if you love any of those descriptors in your thrash metal, then you'll probably enjoy this. Check it out. Okay, this is one I got from the Metalhead box, and I'm going to do my best not to butcher this. The band's name is Aphelium. That's the letter D and then the word Aphelium. And the album is called Profetian Dygden Plikten. It's all in Swedish. I'm not even going to go into all of the track names because those are also Swedish and look very difficult to pronounce. This is a one-man black metal band, and it's very atmospheric black metal. Like, this really reminds me a lot of Emperor. Not quite as proficient as them, but I mean, Emperor's incredible. So I mean, if you're, imitating Emperor really well, then you're clearly exceptional. This is pretty good. I think the production kind of hampers a little bit of what this guy was going for, because sometimes it's a little too many and it kind of dials down the epicness and the ambiance. It doesn't really blend as well. But there's some really cool stuff going on in here, and I think after maybe some more listens, I'll probably get more into it. But for right now, it's pretty good, and it's a pretty interesting kind of ambient black metal listen with some, epic stuff in there, and I guess you could say symphonic. Either way, pretty cool listen. Definitely check this guy out. It's some pretty interesting stuff. Insect Ark The Vanishing. This is pretty different. Now, this was described as psychedelic doom metal, but I find this has a lot in common with post-metal and sludge metal. Like, there's some stuff there that reminds me of a not as aggressive version of Old Man Gloom, but it's very bass-driven. In fact, I believe it started off as just a project between a bassist and a drummer, and then they added a guitarist. The guitars are all about ambience on here, while the bass and drums sort of drive the rhythm. And, I mean, the bass actually has more notable riffs than the guitars. This is just an odd listen. It's very trancey. It's psychedelic in the sense it's not like a happy trip. It's a dark, introspective trip. And there's parts in here that remind me of, like, westerns. Like, there's a song on here, I believe it is Three Gates, or maybe Danube. It reminds me of a western, but the western was directed by David Lynch, and then the Melvins wrote the score to it along with David Lynch. It's just a really wild listen. This came out on Profound Lore, and I'm definitely going to be coming back to this one a lot. It's very immersive, it's very atmospheric, it's just odd, but like kind of that alluring odd. Definitely check it out if you're looking for something a little bit different. It's definitely different. Check it out. Obtained Enslavement, Witchcraft. Now, this is the 2020 reissue of this album that came out in 1997. I believe this came out on Wounded Lore Records. This is out on Peaceville now. And this is symphonic black metal. Now, it's very raw symphonic black metal, and it's not like, the big, lush, arguably overproduced stuff like Dimmu Borgir, but I think it could have benefited from that. With symphonic black metal and any sort of metal that requires a lot of layering, I think the production has to be sort of a bigger thing, and it's kind of thin on this, and it can come off a little cluttered because sometimes the instrumentation isn't separated as well. But there's some really cool elements in here. I love the fact that I think on the second track they use timpani drums, which they just have such an epic sound to them. And overall, the songwriting here is really, really good. The only knock I can make on it is probably the production. I think it kind of hampers it a little bit, but as far as symphonic black metal, which I really don't get into that often, I thought this was a pretty solid listen. Definitely check it out if you're looking for something evil and melodic. Seventh Calling, Epidemic. This was the other one I got in the Metalhead box. This came out on Heaven and Hell Records, which I don't know much about, in 2010, and this is heavy metal / speed metal. This is the one that actually had, like, it's comparable to Metal Church and Overkill. It is, but it isn't. This is not really that good. I hate dogging on bands, but this really isn't very good. I liked some of the riffs on here, but the vocals are pretty bad, especially when they get up high. Like, it sounds like this forced, almost Halford impersonation, and, well, he's not Halford. The production here is pretty rough. And as far as sounding like Overkill or Metal Church, this is like the discount store version of them as far as that goes. It's never really gets full-on thrashy, and as far as the heavy metal stuff, it really doesn't have the big soaring melodies on here. There's some cool riffs again, but I really just could not get into this, and I mean, the vocals just kept really taking me out. Still, I recommend checking it out for yourself. That's just my opinion of it. You might really dig it. I just didn't. Check it out. Saturnalia Temple, Gravity. Now, I actually had one of their albums that I did a collection update with a little while ago, and I wasn't the biggest fan, but I decided to give them a second chance with this newer album. This came out this year on Listenable Records, and it's definitely different. Right away, once you get past the intro track, which is like kind of droning noise, you get greeted to some actual distinct riffs, which was kind of an issue with the other album. This one actually has clean vocals. Now, the thing is, they're not particularly good. They're actually kind of bland, and they're really out front. Like, they kind of drown out the guitar riffs in some spots because they're so loud and there's a lot of reverb on them. But I think they actually tried some different stuff in here, because whereas that one was still considered blackened doom metal, this is actually a little bit closer to just doom metal. Very sludgy doom metal. Like, musically, it's kind of close to Monolord, but it doesn't quite have the hooks that Monolord has. It was still a pretty solid listen. I think it's an improvement over the last one, but there's still some stuff in here I just didn't really care for. But still, I recommend checking it out. It might be your thing. Who knows? And finally, we have Viscera Obsidian. This band actually features former members of Abhorrent Decimation, which I'm familiar with, and a band called Nerve Cell, which I'm also familiar with. Both kind of death metal, deathcore, brutal death. This is an interesting mix of different things. It's definitely deathcore. It's also death metal in there too. There's some brutal death elements. There's some gent in here. There's some metalcore. A lot of stuff in here reminds me of Within the Ruins, especially the guitar work. It's very similar to that when they're not just going full-bore death metal. And the fact that they balance out harsh vocals with clean vocals. The cleans aren't all over the place. They're just pretty much used as choruses, but they're pretty good. And honestly, I really like the songwriting on here. I'm not the biggest deathcore fan anymore, but occasionally bands will pop up that really impress me, and this is a pretty solid release. I will say I think it's a little overproduced, and it sounds really mechanical. The drums sound particularly dry in this, like they just kind of feel sterile. It doesn't even feel human at a point. But musically, I really dug the songwriting. I really got into this. So yeah, definitely check it out. I think it's a pretty solid release. Alright, well that knocks out another one of these. We're going to get back to reviewing albums eventually. We got some more stuff coming from Screaming Toilet. So plenty of underground bands we're going to review, as well as some bigger releases coming up. And again, some new segments and some returning segments. So plenty of stuff to look forward to. So if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you are new to the channel, subscribe. Because if you subscribe, you are entered in our giveaway for a Cryptopsy hoodie. Once we get 1,000 subs, we're going to do a randomizer. And one of you are going to get a Cryptopsy hoodie. So with that, I thank you all for watching. And I will catch you guys later.